The Goha Festival is over, and today I'd like to talk about my list and share some of my favorite games from the event. Before we get into it, I need to give thanks to Whoop, who helped discuss tech choices and playtests extensively for the event, and also to Rahuta, who invited me to participate in a tournament. Not only did I get to practice against many of the best players in the world for 4 hours straight, but afterwards, Rahuta compiled every single match and gave us incredible information, including a detailed matchup chart, win rate by coin flip, and more. I went into that event with the plan to play whatever could best Rebels, but left deciding it was the right call to play it myself. We've covered Royal Rebels on my channel earlier, but this list has a few major differences. First, and least surprising, is the inclusion of 3 Essel. From what I can tell, it's quite common in Japanese lists, but Western players are only on this card around half the time. While any deck can potentially high roll with Essel milling a boss, this deck comes with a built-in free discard anytime you activate the skill, allowing Essel to turn 2 boss hands into a 4800 damage Raigeki. However, this card is not a fiend, meaning it will not be boosted to level 5. There have been several games where drawing too many Essel prevented me from using Invasion, but the upside heavily outclasses the downside. Outside of the high roll situation, you can also use this outside of turn 2 to set up curry bots and babysitter goats for later, while also thinning the deck, which is important to make sure you find your boss monsters, especially heavy metal, during late game. On the off chance you do mill a monster you don't want in the graveyard, Shadowbuyer can always shuffle it back. And moving on to the next tech, we have Palace Gargoyle, a card that sees considerably less play. It might seem pointless, given that the skill is already able to make our monsters level 5, but Gargoyle provides a critical play that I heavily credit success with. By summoning Gargoyle or Shadowbuyer, you can summon a heavy metal before activating the skill. Many players are on Babysitter Goat or Strange Cat, but they almost always set the monster, rather than playing it in attack mode. In short, this play will counter their counter, and allow you to make a game-ending swing. Apart from this, using Gargoyle to set up a heavy metal can avoid activating the skill, and lead into lethal lines that involve using Essel or Kobold to attack for their remaining life. The utility is far beyond what the next best monster, Feral Imp, would bring, which is mostly exclusively walling out attacks from Harpie Lady. Third, we have Royal Rebels Fanatic. Much like Goat, it serves as a 0-attack monster to absorb destruction in the mirror match while setting up your Majesty. My original list was running Descendant of Titans, but in an ironic twist of fate, 0-attack monsters are simply better. Finally, we have my greatest inclusion, or rather, the lack thereof. As you can see, my list is not running Monster Reincarnation to revive a boss monster, nor is it running Two to the Doomed to clear out something I can't out normally. And we don't even use Shield and Sword to swap boss monsters to 0 attack. Our typical combo is already a 4-card investment, which means none of them are particularly strong inclusions. My initial list was not on Fanatic, instead running 3 Cyclone and a Shield and Sword, but I kept on losing due to drawing too many spell cards. I believe it was a very bold choice to cut out what seemed to be some of the strongest cards in the game for an actual 0 attack, 0 defense vanilla monster, but it paid off. And on the topic of cutting my legend spell, a final piece of advice I'd like to give to any Rebel player is to not be afraid to discard Widespread Ruin in service of a push. Heavy Metal, Invasion, and Shadowbuyer add up to exactly 6,000 life points, and if you establish a large lead early, it's much easier to find a way to finish things out. By prioritizing board presence, you can kill an Overlord player before they find the maximum, and you deny several matchups the opportunity to turn Widespread into an extra card for themselves with their Ghost Cyclone. Let's get into some games. For our first match, we have a mirror, and I open up with an incredible set 4, including the Widespread Ruin. They bring in heavy metal, and then swing in. I have my Widespread, but I choose not to use it, thinking that I can use it for more value later, such as against another heavy metal, which would be swinging for sometimes up to 5,000. We bring in our Invasion, clear the board, and get in for 2,300. We could have put the Essel in defense mode, but it doesn't really matter since my opponent would have been able to just switch it to attack mode with the skill anyway. We summon out a Babysitter Goat, and then flip their monsters up, before summoning our own heavy metal. We attempt to go in for game. However, they have a King's Majesty to stop our attack. And I'm okay with this, as it means our widespread ruin is live. They can only use Ghost Cyclone if they have no monsters. But then, they trip to the Doomed, their own goat, to activate the Cyclone and hit my widespread ruin in an absolutely crazy play. Then, Kiribot is coming in. They activate the Hell Tuning Invasion, and we take 3,500. But our opponent is at just 900 life. As long as we get a boss monster and a way to summon it, this game is ours. However, we draw too much back row and have to more or less just set a monster and suffer silently. They use Hell Tuning Invasion one more time. Heavy Metal comes in, and this is game. Even if I had gotten to use my widespread ruin, I would be dead here. But I do want to point out just how good that Trip to the Doomed play was. We are moving on to another ridiculous game. We open with 3 boss monsters, going first. All we can do is summon the Kobold and try to filter. This is definitely the right play, especially in the mirror. We set a trap, but they immediately high-roll us with a Ghost Cyclone. And then, with Hell Tuning Invasion, they even have a level 7 Shadow Buyer to get in for more damage. We draw our own Shadow Buyer combo. We only have 2,300 life points left, so keeping a weaker monster wouldn't have helped us at all. We just get in there and hope they don't draw a high-level monster. And it turns out they don't. They use the Kobold to dig in. And then the Shadow Buyer is going to use its effect to recycle a Heavy Metal before just swinging in. And they pass turn. But now, it's our move and we have lethal on board. We draw a Ghost Cyclone but can't activate it. But how bad could it possibly be? Unfortunately, they have a widespread ruin of their own. And now, all they need to do is draw Invasion. And this game is over. However, they whiff the boss monster again. And it's our move. All we need to do is draw a boss ourselves. And the game, again, is over. But then we also whiff again. We do what we can to thin our hand. And then we swing into the Kobold so they can't filter the deck anymore. Unfortunately, they do have the Hell Tuning Invasion into a boss monster, and that is going to be game. Invasion swings into the goat. You are going to witness the worst game of Yu-Gi-Oh! Of all time. I start off fairly normal by setting 3 cards. My opponent does not draw a boss monster, so they're going to bring out their own set of 3 monsters. However, after swinging in with the Feral Imp into the Kiribot, they are only going to be able to clear 2 of my own monsters. So far, everything makes sense. Then, we draw into the Babysitter Goat and Widespread Ruin. So we are going to go ahead, keep that around, Invasion, and try to protect our invasion with the Babysitter Goat. And we even have a Widespread Ruin for later. We swing into the Shadow Buyer, and I notice at this point that my opponent didn't seem to have a trap card they could use. So now, it's my opponent's turn, and they are going to out this board fairly easily. They activate the Hell Tuning Invasion and summon the Namesake. Royal Levels Invasion wipes the board. And then I realize Heavy Metal eating a Shadow Buyer is exactly 3,700 damage. So I learned from my mistakes from last time and activate Widespread Ruin. Then, it is my turn. We draw. And we don't have the Heavy Metal. I know from last turn they don't have a trap card set. So I go ahead and just summon the Kobold, dig into the Heavy Metal, and swing for game. However, I am very dumb. I had an extra card, and the face down card is King's Majesty. And during the last turn, they didn't have a target for it. I had the Ghost Cyclone in hand, and I threw the game entirely. But we're not done yet. This isn't just me making a little mistake. My opponent is going to bring out 2 level 5 monsters to summon Royal Levels Invasion. However, Royal Levels Invasion is only able to destroy level 4 and lower monsters by not using the skill They cannot clear the heavy metal. And now I'm able to bring in my own invasion and end the game. I absolutely throw the game, and my opponent has thrown it right back. Top 100 finish, by the way. This is the quality of Duel from some of the best players in the world. Next up, we have my favorite deck that I played against in the entire tournament. I start off normally with a set 3 pass, and my opponent is on Harpies. Hysteric Force, unfortunately, is going to flip up my Curry Bot, and they bring in Winged Dragon, Guardian of the Fortress, alongside a Faith Bird, a couple of fairly reliable beaters. The dragon is not super common, but it makes sense if you're just trying to get another good value monster on the board. We draw, and we draw into all the Essels, turn 3. Luckily, this is good enough. Heavy Metal is going to eat that Harpie Lady Sisters and inflict a ton of damage by swinging over the dragon. And then we set our Essel and pass turn. However, what I didn't know was that this would be the last turn of the game. Shield and Sword swings in. And then we see a Trick Pigeon, discarding Dragon's Inferno. That's a little bit weird. Sure, they are running the Winged Dragon, but they're also running Twin Edge Dragon, which they are then able to boost with Harpie Lady Sisters to get over my defense mode Essel and finish the game. I don't think I have ever seen anyone else using this list, and it completely got me by surprise. Let's get into one where we are actually playing pretty well. We open with a set 5. They activate their Essel to get access to a heavy metal line, and then they swing in after setting a card. Unfortunately, all we have are Ghost Cyclones, so we're not going to be able to remove that face down card. But what we can do is activate Hell Tuning Invasion and wipe this board. Invasion destroys both monsters and then goes in for an attack. Unfortunately, as we were unable to activate Ghost Cyclone, Widespread Ruin is going to destroy our card. Then it's their move. They activate the Kobold to draw another card. And now Hell Tuning Invasion is going to flip up my Gargoyle. Here comes another invasion. And this one I also cannot stop at all. I draw a Shadow Buyer. Shadow Buyer becomes level 5. And this lets us summon the heavy metal before activating the skill. We absorb the invasion and then flip up the Babysitter Goat. Had they played that in attack mode, we wouldn't have been able to inflict this much damage. It's a crucial misplay, but they aren't out of the running yet. We only have 2100, and an invasion ends the game. Fortunately, they draw a heavy metal, but they do play a Fire Breath. They know this is a dead back row card, but they still choose to do it to reduce my chances of drawing what I need on the next turn, and that is an incredible play. Unfortunately, for them, I do draw a heavy metal line, and Panda concedes, as I bring in heavy metal number 2. Our final match is against an Overload player, and they start with a really mysterious set 2 pass. By keeping all 3 cards in hand, I am pretty sure they have the maximum. So I have this heavy metal, but instead of choosing to use the effect, I decide to play around the maximum and simply swing in. Unfortunately, they have a Recital, so I get in for no damage and don't even get to destroy the monster. They use the skill to debuff my heavy metal, and then they get in for 1800 damage. It's our move, and we draw an invasion. It's not super great, but we are going to be able to swing in for some damage. We use Hell Tuning Invasion and wipe the field with our own invasion before swinging for just 400 damage. Remember, we don't want to make a big swing, otherwise we will lose to the maximum summon. It's their move, and they decide it's time to out my invasion. Seven Sword Magician comes onto the board, and once again, they set a backward to protect it. I know they are on Recital, so I figure it is much more likely that card is going to be a Recital or some kind of spell trap removal, rather than the Widespread Ruin. And that means I use Shadow Buyer's effect. and summon a heavy metal, once again, without using my skill. And this means Shadowfire is able to come in and finish this game. We swing in for 46 and 12, and despite my opponent having the maximum in hand, turn 1, we managed to take a victory. Thank you for watching.